Hello class, this week we are looking at the Reformation. Now as you can see in the word Reformation, we have the word reform. Reform is an important word. It means that they are going to reform the church, which means that they are going to point out what issues the Roman Catholic Church has and try and make these issues better, okay? So again, we are looking at Reformation. Now the one person that leads this Reformation, his name is Luther. Causes of the Reformation. So if we think of the Italian Renaissance, we're thinking about the idea of humanism. Now humanism is a more secular idea. What secular means is that it is a more worldly idea. It is not based in Christianity. It is not based in the Roman Catholic Church, okay? It is a lot more to do with how amazing humans can be, okay? Not looking to God. These ideas, because of the printing press, they are able to spread around Europe. So all of a sudden, we have people are becoming a lot more educated. And the people who are becoming educated in humanist secular ideas, okay? Now, the four causes of the Reformation, it's broken up in social, political, economic, and religious. Let's look at social first. So, back to the Renaissance. The Renaissance views humanism and secularism. What these two values end up doing is it causes people to become educated and start questioning what the church tells them. The second thing, that the social aspect, is because of the printing press, it's helping spread the critical ideas of the church. So all of a sudden you have literature that is being able to be printed and spread throughout Europe, talking about the negative aspects of church. In the Middle Ages, people did not have access to books. They did not know what the Bible was really saying. Now, since the Bible can be printed, more people have the ability to read the Bible and decide for themselves what the church, if the church is saying, is true. Let's go on to political. This is the second cause of the Reformation. So political is we have these powerful monarchs. These are kings. These kings, they start to challenge the church as well. The reason why is the church holds a lot of power in Europe. These kings don't necessarily like the type of power that the church holds. So many of these monarchs or kings, they decide that if they challenge the church, looking at the type of things that are written about it, they actually have a leg to stand on, okay? They actually have something to challenge the church with. The other thing is that many leaders, they viewed the Pope as a foreign ruler. They did not like it that the Pope had sort of this extreme power over many different empires. Again, they decide that they're going to challenge it. This is another thing that sort of causes this Reformation, to challenge the church. The third thing we're going to look at is economic. Economic, if we have European princes and kings were jealous of the church's wealth. So if we think of throughout the Middle Ages, the church gains a lot of political power, but the church gains a lot of money. And the way that they gain this money is through taxing these peasants and nobles and kings. Well, at this time, people are starting to get upset. They're basically starting to get jealous of the amount of money the church has. The other thing that ends up happening is that pretty much on everything, the church has a tax. So they tax any sort of good or product. This starts upsetting merchants, okay? They are saying, well, the church is already very rich. Why do we have to pay even more taxes to them? What is the reason for this tax? That is the economic cause. The third thing is religious. So, as we can see, the Roman Catholic Church at this time, it has too much political power and too much economic wealth. That means they have power in empires and they have money. Well, this isn't the main idea of the Roman Catholic Church. So a lot of these church leaders, they are ending up becoming very corrupt. They're more focused on getting taxes and money from merchants and kings than they are on actually preaching what are the good things in the Bible. Okay? People are starting to take notice that this happens. And not only that, they have the books to sort of support this. So many people found the church practices such as sale as indulgences unaccepted. Now, sale of indulgences is something we sort of looked at in the Middle Ages. It's basically peasants would be buying their way into heaven. But this isn't the point of Christianity. The point is that Jesus saves you from your sin. It is not that you can actually buy your way into heaven. Again, this is looking at how the church is corrupt. So many people on a social, political, economic, and religious scale were getting frustrated with the church. Now, while we're going to be looking at Luther later, Luther is not the first person to try and reform the church. First we have is John Wycliffe. Now, we looked at John Wycliffe in the Middle Ages, okay? He is one of the first person to actually write the Bible in Germanic languages, so that people who did not understand Latin, which was the language the Bible was written in. Another early reformer was Erasmus. Erasmus we look at with the Northern Renaissance. Also, we have Thomas More. Now, if you don't remember, Erasmus, he writes a book sort of poking fun at some of these Middle Ages people, like merchants, lovers, and pompous priests. Thomas More, on the other hand, he writes Utopia. They both are sort of critiquing society. They're saying, look, these are the negative things of society. Let's try to change them. Then we have the 95 Thesis. Now, the 95 Thesis, these are 95 complaints that Luther ends up giving to the church. And the reason why he starts to complain is because of this man, Johann Tetzel. Now, what Johann Tetzel was doing in Germany, we are in the land of Germany right now, is he was selling indulgences. What selling indulgences mean is that basically if a peasant wants to get to heaven, they can pay a certain amount of money for their sin. Now, this is not what the Bible preaches. What the Bible says is that Jesus died for your sins, and all you needed to do was pray to God and you would be forgiven. But what Johann Tetzel is doing is he's actually charging people money for their sins. He's saying, you sinned, give me $10 and you will go to heaven. This is what starts, this was a huge corruption in the church at the time. So then we have this man named Luther. This is Luther right here. He sees this and he is upset. Okay? He does not like it that someone is trying to sell their way into heaven. So he creates a list of 95 things that the church is doing that goes against the Bible. It also goes against the idea of selling these indulgences. He posts this as a list on the door in Wittenberg at their church. And then he invites any scholar, that means any educated person, to come and debate it with him. So they're like, if you do not think that these 95 things that I've said are true, come and tell me why they aren't. This single action is what leads to the Reformation. So this man right here, he's an educated man. He looks at what the church is doing and saying, this is not right. And this is how the Reformation begins. So if you can imagine, we have Luther, and there is the list of 95 theses on the door. Now let's look a little bit at what Luther is teaching instead of what the Catholic Church is teaching. Luther instead teaches that people can win salvation. That means they can get into heaven by faith alone. If they believe that Jesus is the Son that saved them, if they believe in God, they can go to heaven. Okay? The second thing that he believes, or that he preaches, is that all people with faith are equal. So the priest is not above the peasant. Everyone is equal. Now, of course, the Pope is not very happy about this, and he ends up trying to threaten Luther. So Pope Leo X, he decides that he is going to threaten him with excommunication. But what ends up happening is Luther says, go ahead, excommunicate me, okay? He is not going to take back his statements because he believes that this is the truth. So while Luther is excommunicated, we also have the Emperor of Germany also opposing Luther's ideas. So at the time we have Charles V. He's the Holy Roman Emperor. And he issues the Edict of Worms, declaring that what Luther says is a lie. He is a heretic. Okay? But Luther has already gained followers. He has gained a bunch of people in Germany and Northern Europe who believe that Luther is true. They call this group Lutherans. This ends up leading to a war in Germany. We have the Lutherans, or what later is called the Protestants, versus the Catholics. It ends with the Peace of Augsburg. Basically what happens is that each prince decides the religion of their state. So every empire that exists in Europe gets to decide whether they will be Protestant, which is following in Luther's path, or Catholic. This shortly leads to all of England also becoming Protestant, but for a slightly different reason. First of all, we have is Henry VIII. Now Henry VIII has married this woman and is demanding that she give him a son. She only gives him daughters. So he would like a divorce. Now the Pope, the Roman Catholic Pope, refuses to give him a divorce. He gets angry. He says, well, if you refuse to give me a divorce, I'm going to become Protestant. And that is exactly what starts to happen in England. He demands that everyone in England becomes Protestant. Because after they switch to Protestantism in England, he ends up divorcing his wife. They actually make this a law in England. The parliament system, which is the government in England, they pass a law that ends any of the Pope's power in England. And Henry, the king, he becomes the head of the English church. Okay? So if you can imagine, the Pope no longer has power in England. Now, King Henry has the power of the church. Thomas More refuses to go against the Catholic Church. Now, if you remember who Thomas More is, he writes Utopia from the Northern Renaissance. King Henry gets angry and he beheads him. He cuts off Thomas More's head. The last thing that ends up happening in England is once Henry has claimed Protestantism for England, not everyone in England is going to agree. And there's sort of a shift in power between kings. So once Henry dies, we have a lot of religious turmoil that follows. We have Protestantism under King Edward. Then we have Catholicism under Queen Mary. Okay, so England keeps on switching back and forth depending on who is in power. So here we have some of the monarchs in. So this is Queen Mary. She ruled England as Catholic. Queen Elizabeth ruled England as Protestant, and I believe this is King Edward ruling as Protestant as well. Lastly, when Queen Mary dies, Elizabeth takes over, and she makes sure that England is Protestant. Elizabeth is the second daughter of King Henry. So remember, King Henry was trying to have a boy. He never ends up having a boy, okay? And this is when Queen Elizabeth, she ends up forming the Anglican Church. This is the English Protestant Church. and they no longer accepted Catholics in England.